kind of a car that turns a grown man into a kid.
It's just, to me, the most fabulous car that's ever been built.
What made it truly timeless was its styling.
It'd be a little difficult to parallel park, but once it's rolling, it's a great driving car.
For me, it's been one of the really important things in my life.
Here in Auburn, Indiana, you had, emerging from a medium-sized factory, you had three great stellar automobiles, Auburn, Cord, and Duesenberg, aiming at the elite motorists of the age. And there was a price range for everyone. There was the Auburn, which was sporty looking and handsome in styling, just a little bit more expensive than the average car. You had the Cord, which was highly exotic, front-wheel drive, the first front-drive car in America, quite a bit more costly than that. And then you had Duesenberg, which was in a class by itself. And it was the most expensive and best engineered and best produced automobile in the U.S. And they all came from the same corporation run by one amazing man, E.L. Cord, who from 1926 to 1937 had an auto empire that was independent and apart from all the big companies in Detroit. The Auburn Automobile Company was an outgrowth of an existing wagon and coach and buggy maker here in Auburn, the Eckhart Carriage Company. The Eckhart brothers started experimenting with cars, and they built Auburn cars for the first time to sell to the public in 1903. And they sold 50 in their first year after showing them at the Chicago Auto Show. Well, unfortunately, a recession hit the U.S. in the 1921-22 winter season. And the company never recovered from that recession, and they really needed help from someone outside. And so they recruited E.L. Cord to come here, and the first step he took was to sell 700 stockpiled cars that were on the back fields. And he merely pulled those out and had them repainted in bright, colorful combinations of paint schemes that had never been used on Auburns before. He had enough surplus parts to build 1,500 more cars, and he did exactly the same thing with those. Well, Mr. Cord had a dream of building America's best motor car. And so he looked at Duesenberg, which was a company in Indianapolis, Indiana, that was already building high-end, custom-bodied passenger cars. He had enough capital built up in Auburn Automobile Company through exchanging stock, and with no outright cash, he was able to acquire Duesenberg, a very healthy going concern. And he told the two Duesenberg brothers, Fred and August, that he wanted them to drop the car they were making altogether and not offer a passenger car product for a couple of years and spend all their time on the development of the great Model J. It sold for over $15,000. It had huge horsepower.
The car is a Model J Duesenberg, supercharged. At the time this car was built, there wasn't such an automobile existing in this country. It's got a flamboyancy to it that is not offensive, and it's a big, massive car. Well, the radiator itself, when it's out of the car, is just under 4 feet tall. You're looking at a headlight with a 12-inch diameter lens in it. It's got 4 feet of timing chain in the engine, and that would sink most cars. It could make a real nice anchor. They put their money where you could see it, and it went into the paintwork, in the body panels, and metal finishing and chrome plating. It went everywhere on the car. The car has a sensation to me of just the whole car is wrapping me up in the car, and it's protecting me. And it becomes straight as an arrow in 110, 115 miles an hour. That car is just as straight as an arrow. And it's just got a real eerie feeling, and there's a scream going down the highway. And the engine goes dead silent, and all the noise is in back of you. And it's a wonderful feeling. It really is. Many of the people who are going to buy one of these would say, well, if it'll outperform such and such, then I'll buy it.
It was a car also that sold very much by word of mouth among rich people and movie stars. Gary Cooper would buy a Duesenberg and then buy a second one, and that would cause Clark Gable to buy a Duesenberg and also buy a second one, and they would even buy the same model. There was a lot of copycat activity going on.
When I was a kid, had an opportunity of working in a local garage to put a head gasket on Clark Gable's convertible coupe. I said, I've got to have one of these things sometime. And when you drive one of these cars at speed for about 6 hours, the engine temperatures and exhaust temperatures supersaturate. If you were to touch the frame in the car, you'd burn your hands. You walk past the car in the back end, you can hear the gasoline boil in the gas tank. There's one thing that's bad about the car, and it really is concerning. I've never been able to solve it. It's a kind of a car that turns a grown man into a kid.
By the late 20s, Mr. Cord, probably through his ego as much as anything else, had a goal of naming a car after himself, as most auto executives did. And he wanted to introduce America's first production line car that would have front-wheel drive. This was an all-new idea, and believe it or not, in the late 20s there was not ever a front-wheel drive car on the market. And so he commissioned the Cord L29.
Marilyn and I had been looking for the right classic car to restore. And I'd seen an ad in Hemmings Motor News that advertised an L29 Cord. Marilyn and I looked the car over, and then we got off to the side, and I said to her, well, what do you think? Do you think this is the one? And she smiled, and she says, if you're ever going to restore a classic, she says, that's the one. So we negotiated for about a day, and we bought it. And the rest of the story took 12 years and 4 months to do the restoration. Well, I was putting in about 20 hours a week, and if you figure that out, that's 10,000 hours over 10 years. I have no regrets for spending that much time on it. It was a labor of love, and there was often times when I'd spend many, many hours just to perfect one little thing just the way I wanted it. I think it's a crime to destroy history and do anything but that. So I kept great records, right down to minute details, even so far as what was their typical spacing on tacks in the upholstery. I would make a note of that they were 3 inches apart, and I did it the same way. The door handles, the interior hardware have embossing that's very dainty, like expensive silverware. Very fine detail. I don't think anybody can point out anything that's wrong in quality, fit and finish, or authenticity. And if there is something wrong, I want to know about it because I want to change it. I like the long hood. The fact that it's front-wheel drive meant that there was no drive shaft tunnel. Therefore, it was several inches lower than any other car in its time period. It gave it a long, low, sleeky look. I love the Brome body style. It's a kind of mysterious look. You wonder who's in the back seat because if you look at the car from the side, you cannot see the passengers. To me, it's a very elegant car.
E.L. Cord, in marketing the car that bears his name, wanted to create elegance and good taste. And one of the methods he used to do this was on the front of the simple but tasteful brochures to put a completely bogus coat of arms which distinguished his cars from those that had a mere logo or badge.
Well, the Cord room is a bedroom or showroom, if you will, for the car. The garage pretty much had to be where it is to fit on our lot here on top of the hill. And we wanted the Cord room to be directly behind it so that we could drive through the garage and into the Cord room. So really the rest of the house developed around the Cord room. We've secured the room with airtight weather stripping to keep it what we call our dust-free room. And it makes the preservation of the car much better. It's environmentally controlled by the heating and cooling of the house. So it's maintaining a constant 68 or 70 degrees in here year-round in a dust-free environment. It's nice in the evening if you don't want to bother with paperwork or watching television or just enjoying a walk in the moonlight, to just open the doors and walk into the cord room, which is right off of our living room.
By 1929, it was the boom times in this country. It was the best economy America had ever known, and Mr. Cord has spent the previous 5 years building up his auto company and his auto empire to where he had enough companies to form a conglomerate, Cord Corporation. And his financial fortunes were very flush, and he had quite a reputation on Wall Street as being this boy wonder in the auto industry. And he had set the world on fire with the styling and the looks of his cars. But also he got more involved in racing and speed testing and the performance of his cars to prove how fast they were. And that's really what he concentrated on quite a lot in the 1930s.
Clear the way. Here comes the master of the track, monster of power and strength. And here's the first lap at 145 miles an hour, 2.5 miles a minute. What a pace. And it's only warming up. Say, is this a car or a combat plane?
This is a 1935 Duesenberg SJ Speedster. It was built for Ab Jenkins for world's distance records on the Bonneville Salt Flats, and it's known as the Mormon Meteor. Ab Jenkins was a native of Utah, and he started out as a racer, and he raced in different types of races, but he was primarily a long-distance racer. He promoted the Salt Flats as a race course and the state of Utah. And he raced with Pierce Arrow in 1933 and 34, and then he switched to Duesenberg. And the Duesenberg was the most powerful American motor car, and the SJ Duesenberg had 320 horsepower. So this was a good car to start with. This car was especially modified by August Duesenberg, one of the Duesenberg brothers, and the engine, through various modifications, was brought up to 400 horsepower and 5,000 RPM. And the car actually turned between 4,000 and 4,500 RPMs for the entire 24-hour run. The primary focus of the trip was to break the distance records for 24 hours. And this car did that in 1935. He averaged 135 miles an hour for 24 hours and 153 miles an hour for 1 hour. The car was actually timed top speed 168 miles an hour. That's not an official record, but that's what we've been told before by the members of the family. This was quite a feat when you consider the most powerful car in America other than Duesenberg probably had about 175 horsepower, and most of them had 50 or 60 horsepower. And the speeds on the highway were around 45 miles an hour. That's about as fast as you could drive on our roads. So to take a car and be able to go that fast and not have substantial tire problems, or suspension problems, or engine problems is really quite extraordinary given the period of time that they were establishing these records. The Duesenberg was an over-engineered car, and where it was primarily designed as a luxury car, it was capable of being modified and pushed far beyond the limits of a normal operating environment. The car drives great. The steering's very light, the brakes are light. It would be a little difficult to parallel park, but once it's rolling, it's a great driving car. And it's just quite a thrill to look over this long hood and the great sounding engine. And it has a period where it resonates, and it really is a joy to drive. Just the styling of the car is so dramatic, and the outside exhaust, and it's just, to me, the most fabulous car that's ever been built. I'm just very thankful that I can own it for a little while. And I hope that I'll be able to leave it to my children, and they'll be able to enjoy it as much as I have.
By 1935, the Depression economic climate was catching up with Mr. Cord, and so the company needed a new spark to make it come alive. And even though they didn't have any research and development monies at all, Mr. Cord said, we've got to revive the Cord in a whole new look, a whole new generation. It's got to be the emblematic Art Deco style car of the mid-30s, and it's got to be totally different looking, ultra modern, different looking than anything else on the market, different than what we've built before. So he commissioned his workers to come up with the great 810 Cord, which came out then for 1936.
It's a 1936 Cord Model 810 Westchester sedan. It was made by the Auburn Automobile Company in 1936 and 1937, and they made about 3,000 of them in those two model years. Planning began in 1934, and in less than a year they had actually completed the mechanical design and the styling, both of which differed widely from the norm at that time. Auburn needed about $1 million to bring the Cord to production. They didn't have $1 million because they had lost nearly $4 million the previous year. So they went to the parent corporation, the Cord Corporation, to ask for a loan in order to produce the car, and were turned down in January of 1935. And so they made what was really a rather rare corporate decision. The president of the Auburn Automobile Company gave the go-ahead to construct 5 prototypes in the hopes that something would come up that would permit them to build a car. As a matter of fact, something did, and their central manufacturing company, which was their sheet metal stamping division, was able to consummate a huge sale of kitchen cabinets to Montgomery Ward, and as a result, the money became available. But now they needed to get the permission of the parent corporation, which had previously turned down the project. They couldn't very well show them a finished car because that would essentially have said that they had countermanded the decision unilaterally. And so the day before the corporate meeting on July 8, 1935, the designer of this car, Gordon Burig, took some photographs of a quarter-scale model that had been constructed of the car. Those photographs went to Chicago on the night train, were shown to the board the next morning, and resulted in the approval of the project. 3 weeks later, the first prototype left on a shakedown cruise to Los Angeles. Now, while the people at Auburn could seemingly perform miracles, even they could not have gotten approval to build a brand new car on July 8th and send it off down the road on July 29th. The Cord was front-wheel drive, and that meant a number of things. It meant a completely new drive unit, engineered from scratch. It had a 4-speed transmission. Most American cars had 3 speeds at that time. The transmission was shifted by an unusual Bendix mechanism that involved solenoids and switches and vacuum and a whole bunch of things, which makes it a wonder that it ever shifts at all, but it really does. It had a V8 engine, which was still relatively unusual in '36. The engine had aluminum cylinder heads, aluminum manifold. So all in all, mechanically, the Cord was a very interesting automobile. But what made it truly timeless was its styling. The Cord was the first production car with concealed headlamps, that is, headlights that disappear into the fenders and can be raised at night when they're needed. They are operated by a mechanical crank arrangement, one for each side. It's the Cord's body style that makes it unique and what most people remember about it. In every list I've ever seen of the 10 most beautiful cars ever built, or the 100 most beautiful industrial objects ever designed, the Cord is always near the top of the list. The first Cord I ever saw was when I was 12 years old. And actually, with a group of friends, I was playing hooky from school on a beautiful late spring day, and we wandered past a used car lot in the Bronx, where I lived at that time. And there was this absolutely fascinating car sitting right out in front, and the attendant in a chair tilted back against the post. And I asked him what it was, and he said it was a Cord. And I said, "Is that a German car?" to my eternal shame. And he said, "No, it's American." And what I did was I began from that time to collect everything I could find that was written on the Cord. And on my 18th birthday, I bought my first Cord. It was the first of 5 that I was to own.
In marketing the Cord 810, a radical and innovative car which broke new ground in almost every way, they produced brochures which were very conservative, which didn't include either the engineering or flamboyant, exaggerated photographs, because the car was expected to sell itself.
Auburn produced Cords in only 6 colors. The only one of them that was what we would today call metallic is this one. It's called Cadet Gray, and it was followed in parentheses in the ads by the word luminescence. And the way they accomplished that was to grind up fish scales and to mix it in with the paint. My name for the car, and many people name their favorite automobile, is Moonshadow, because it looks particularly beautiful in the twilight just as the moon is coming up. It picks up the orange and red rays of California sunsets, and it is truly something to behold. I think that everyone needs one or more passions in their lives. I have been blessed with a lovely wife who is one of those passions, and another one is my hobby, and my hobby is the Cord. I drive it, I write about it, most of all I enjoy it, and sometimes I just stand and look at it. And while that may not be easily understandable to someone who doesn't have that kind of a passion, for me it's been one of the really important things in my life.
By the middle of 1937, by summertime, Mr. Cord realized his figures had gone into the red too long and too often. He had a lot of financial and legal advisors surrounding him, and they all advised unanimously to get out of the auto industry now. And so the auto companies went into dissolution. But the moment they did, people started recognizing these cars as something special. The minute they were orphaned, obsolete cars, people started collecting them.
I like to think of a story that Gordon Burig told me many years ago. He said, back in the 20s and 30s, automobiles were like snowflakes. They were very elegant, they were very dainty, they had fine detail. They weren't very aerodynamic, they just kind of floated down, but they were beautiful. And he said, in modern day cars, we've melted the snowflake, and it's become a teardrop.
I don't know of anyone who could have accomplished what Mr. Cord did in such a short time and put out cars under duress, under the worst economic climate the country has ever known. I really don't know of a Walter Chrysler or a Henry Ford or a William Durant or an R.E. Olds who could have done just what Mr. Cord did, especially at his young age.